The world that we live in is always changing, and the most recent change that I think people aren't talking about is how the truth is dead. And that's because journalism is dying. And no, I'm not talking about traditional print media, I'm talking about your favorite content creators as well. This is about the people who promise to give you their opinions, their objective journalism, their previews, reviews, impressions, and opinions on things, but they hide when they're actually sponsored, while still technically complying with the law. They hide the conditions under which they reached to those opinions, or how much money changed hands before that opinion was reached. And even more than that, it's about how the current system, how modern journalism incentivizes people to reach the same opinions that everybody wants them to reach, because you get more money for doing that. And while this is a very complicated topic, it does affect pretty much everything that you see online today. And this was predictable. This path has been laid out for a very long time, and we see examples of it every day. And that's because there's a line, a very clear line, between what is real and what people would like to be real. And that line is being blurred. And people are selling you things that you would like to be real as if they are objective reality, as long as they can siphon attention from you. We already live in a world where so many parts of society are collapsing. So to see this happen is very worrying. And we could close our eyes and enjoy the ride. Ignorance is bliss after all, but I would rather not. I'd rather try and see what is actually happening and look for solutions to that problem, and I'd rather you be aware as well. So we need to examine what's going on so that we can take those steps for the future, and in order to do that, we need to really go back as well so that we can understand where we are today. I guess we need to answer the question, what even is journalism? Because you have to ask yourself the question, who can I trust anymore? So this is a fairly long video, but it's a promise that I've made many times before. If I make a video on it, it's because I believe I have something important to say. And by the end of this video, I hope you have a comprehensive knowledge of most of the system we're in, where it comes from, and what problems there are with it that we need to fight against now. So before we can talk about the death of journalism, we have to really establish what journalism even is.
Freedom of the press.
Now there's many types of journalism, and I want to focus on a very common form of it, which is reviews and opinions. So this would include things like commentary at this point in time. A lot of stuff like investigative journalism is a separate issue altogether. Now, to simplify things, there's three major forks of how we consider this type of journalism. Those being critique, consumer-oriented, and entertainment-focused. Critiques are something that is popular once again through things like video essays. It's the idea that you can take something, deconstruct it, and analyze it very in-depth to understand all of its ins and outs. Ask bigger questions. What is its artistic merit? What was its cultural impact? Things like that. Entertainment-focused reviews, which I have here the example of James Rolfe or the Angry Video Game Nerd, are reviews that are more focused on providing something entertaining for the viewer. Their merit isn't in critique or having epiphanies or on telling you if you should purchase something or if it's worth your time. And these reviews often blur the line between being art themselves and not just a review of other art. And finally, we have consumer-oriented reviews. And these are the ones that you might have grown up with. The idea that you'd open a magazine or a website and they would tell you what is the best TV to buy. They would tell you if this movie was going to be worth the price of admission and your time. They would tell you what the best vacuum cleaner is. All three of these review types can mingle. We see it a lot with video essays, which serve as an entertainment genre within themselves. We've seen consumer-oriented reviews become a little bit more entertainment skewed, and we've seen more reviews that try to blend critique and review to lead to those reviews that are like 45 minutes long. One of my main mission statements with this channel is to blend all of these things together, and here I am, I keep trying. Now, consumer-oriented reviews are the ones that have seen the most difficulties over time. They come with a large list of problems. Firstly, they're time-sensitive. They're only valuable during the period of time which that product or that thing that is being reviewed is a question mark in people's heads. Because it's time-sensitive, you often want to have access to things before they're even available to the general public, which means that access journalism becomes a really big factor. These reviews are also meant to be unbiased. If you are trying to define what the best thing is, you can't have a clear bias towards a company or any sort of corruption. It was also always meant for an increasingly diverse audience, which is reaching its peak today, where we have things like economic inequality and the overall reach of reviews and products being the entire world. And so it's very hard to find objective parameters on which to review something, because $20 to you is not the same as $20 to someone else, and 100 hours is not the same to you than to someone else. They are also very hard to sustain economically, although that is true of pretty much all of these. If anything, the one that has it the easiest are the ones that focus more on the entertainment value.
I say it's time to send John Deere a Dear John.
And finally, in a world where everything is meant to be this objective review that aspires to be as objective and unbiased as possible, to look for those metrics that you can just put as statistics, how do you distinguish yourself? Why would somebody go to your website and not a different website? Why would people watch your review and not someone else's? Besides presenting things better or easier to understand, there really wasn't much to do. You just had to apply the same system to reach, ideally, the same conclusion. The main value of having different people doing it was to make sure that they all reached the same conclusion that would, by extension, guarantee that it was the correct one. Having all of these problems stacked against consumer-oriented reviews, they needed to change, and eventually one of these problems was going to blow up. And it turned out to be the combination of access journalism and the economically sustainable part.
Take a look at it, but it's probably not worth the purchase.
Now, there's many different examples of this moment, but I choose 2007 with the review of Kane and Lynch by one Jeff Gersman over at GameSpot. This is an event that I think has had ripples throughout many industries, and one that personally was very impactful to me, and I guess to the life choices that I would end up making to be here talking to you right now. Jeff Gersman was at the time the editorial director of GameSpot, the website dedicated to video game reviews that we still have around today. He took it upon himself to review the new game Kane and Lynch, which at the time had a massive marketing campaign on the GameSpot website, covering most of the sides and the headers of the website in banners for Kane and Lynch, telling you to pre-order now, to check out the game, the usual. Jeff Gersman did not think that Kane and Lynch was a particularly good game, and he gave it a 6 out of 10. Reacting to this, the people at marketing and partially within the company, the publisher responsible for this being Eidos, caused a huge fuss around it. And while we have never really known every single part of the specifics of this, Jeff Gersman basically stood up for himself and for the integrity of reviews, and GameSpot fired him. It was more important that money was flowing in and keeping the relationships with these marketing agencies that have to do with video games happy than it was to provide the massive audience that GameSpot had back then with a fair review of the game, no matter if they were advertising. This was so long ago that Jeff Gersman would leave, put up a MySpace page, and start a blog that would become Giant Bomb, which has had its own fair share of history, but is still around today, even if it's maybe not what it was. Actually, it's not at all. And so things began to change. For me, this is really the birth of content. This moment was huge. People started to realize that they really couldn't trust pretty much anything that they saw online because they were dependent on things like those advertisers, on maintaining good relationships with the publishers and the developers of games to continue guaranteeing access to those games, to be able to publish those reviews that would make them money by generating traffic. But the traffic itself wasn't making the money, it was the advertisement, which again could be some of those games. This parasitic relationship where the people doing the reviews depend on the people making the product in order to make a review that generates them views and therefore money to keep doing what they do hasn't really changed that much. The problems of access journalism, as we'll see in a moment, are still here. So how should this consumer-oriented form of reviews evolve? Well, in the direction that made sense.
Future.
In order to stand out more and add value into the reviews themselves, it meant infusing personality. Audiences understood that biases would always exist, so audiences decided that they would rather know the biases ahead of time and then make a decision based on that personality. And if personality was such an important part of the process, why limit yourself to text? Arguably the form that least personality can convey, especially to a large amount of people. Why not transition to formats like video and audio? And in this new world, new voices begin to rise. Be that early YouTube critics or Giant Bomb themselves that pioneered formats like Quick Looks, which was sitting down and playing a game in video form with people talking over it and giving their opinions. And yes, early YouTube, including things like Angry Joe or Total Biscuit. But as it changed, some problems still remained. This was still very time sensitive. It still had the problem of access journalism, of maintaining that good relationship with the people who make the things. Now we had switched the idea of it meant to be unbiased into meant to be honest. The problem of it meant for a more diverse audience started to disappear as everybody started chasing their own niche. The pie just got that much bigger with the internet exploding. But it was still hard to sustain economically, sometimes depending not just on the access portion, but on being able to sell things to sponsors or applying for partnerships. And it still was hard to compete and distinguish, as that kind of got mirrored by how easy it was for anybody to start their own YouTube channel. But now new problems begin to arise as well. By infusing personality into what is now just content, and where the review portion of it might fall a little bit by the wayside, you also incentivize a cult of personality. You incentivize parasocial relationships. You combine this with the fact that extremism is now something that is pretty much everywhere in life, and then you start adding things like cancel culture that is an ever-present threat to pretty much everybody who is a personality, and that everything that you do now needs to have a value by itself. It must be entertaining. And all of these things have added up to a loss of integrity and accountability. And ultimately, to the question that I started this video with, in a creator-driven content economy, who can you trust? Now, funny enough, the most recent examples of these problems have to do with Star Wars Outlaws. Firstly, we have the case of a German YouTuber who took down their video because for their preview to be able to be uploaded, it had to be pre-approved by a third-party company that managed the access to that preview. Now, I want to make it clear that we don't know if that was the case for everybody. Maybe a lot of the other journalists that had access to the previews from other countries or that have pre-existing relationships with Ubisoft got direct access from them with no pre-approval process, which is how it should be done. At the end of the day, you're giving me access to the game, and if your game is good, I will tell people. It's basically just on honor. In exchange, I get views, which gives me money, and maybe, if your game is good, you sell more copies of it, which is good for you. But in the case of this one specific YouTuber, they took down their video because of that pre-approval process. Even though they said that they enjoyed the game, they couldn't stand by the fact that they had to modify some of the language, especially at the start, which was meant to drive engagement and long-term viewer retention throughout their hour-long video, because it was a little bit too sensationalist for the people at that marketing agency. It's very easy to come to some incredibly negative conclusions here, both about the YouTuber, which I respect greatly for coming out, talking about this, and taking down their video, but also against Ubisoft. And trust me, Ubisoft as a punching bag is a really fun thing to punch, but I really do believe in things like actual journalism. We use the word alleged today like it's a goddamn joke. Like, alleged because I can't get in legal trouble, but you know that it's true. We know that it's not alleged. No, man, sometimes things are just alleged. It's just speculation, but if you can't confirm it, we shouldn't talk about it as truth. And in this case, for as much as Ubisoft can be a punching bag, we don't know if it's their fault. It ultimately has to be, because they did allow for this third-party company to have this pre-approval process, but a lot of things can get lost in these big campaigns in multiple different countries dealing with different agencies and different languages. It doesn't mean that Ubisoft, to everyone, needed pre-approval of their stuff. It could be something that slipped through the cracks. And we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I would very much like to know from everybody who did a preview on Star Wars Outlaws if their video needed to be pre-approved and by whom, so that we know where to pin the blame on. And so we know if they are trustworthy and if Ubisoft is trustworthy. And that common theme of trust gets even more diluted in just a second.
How could you keep this from me?
The situation does indeed become worse, because even without the concept of the pre-approval by another agency, which is literally modifying the language with which they are allowed to talk about the game in exchange for being able to play the game, a large amount of the people covering it were flown out to Disneyland, to Galaxy's Edge, to enjoy a premium VIP experience of the Star Wars world in order to then play the game for 4 hours, capture footage of their own, take it home, and then make a video. And in some cases, those videos were sponsored. And I don't want to throw any specific creator under the bus, because I think that the solution to this sort of problem, as we'll talk about later, has to be more all-encompassing. But some creators came out and explained what had happened. They explained that they had been flown out. They explained all of the privileges that they enjoyed. They explained that they had all of these things given to them, that while it was not directly money, was definitely worth a heck of a lot of money. Some of them specified that there was no requirement in taking the trip. You could take the trip and play the game and record footage and not make a video in the end, which would also indicate that whatever they would say in that video would be their own opinion without any pre-approval. But that's also not clear. And then aside from those, there are a number of creators whose previews of Star Wars within that whole trip and that whole package are sponsored. And there is a large amount of creators that do not disclose that information in their videos themselves. They leave it in the comments. And while I think this is especially terrible for the channels that are covering it that pride themselves on being video game journos, on being those types of content creators that are taking over, that are kicking out the old corrupt media, and being their own individuals who cover games truthfully for you. While those are the sketchiest, it's equally bad that other channels that don't position themselves that way and simply position themselves as entertainers who give their opinion also try and hide it. Also try and not tell you that it's sponsored. They won't say it in the video. It'll be positioned like any other preview that channel has ever done, or it'll be positioned like any other review or impressions. And if you go down to the description, you'll read that it's a sponsored video. And we don't know what that sponsored video entails. What are they limited to? It's a whole big mess, because other people will tell you that the video is sponsored, but they won't tell you that they were flown out to Disney for it. And before we keep going, I do think that there is a space, as sketchy and as complicated as it is to navigate, for people to have sponsored videos. Like I said before, the economic part of this is complicated. So if you can get a big paycheck from a company in order to cover their game, I think that it's enticing to take it. And there is a way to do that ethically. I can't believe that we don't normalize things, considering how influential, how important creators are, to say, hey, I was sponsored by this company to cover this game. But in that agreement that I am going to show you the clause of right now, it is very clear that they cannot control anything I say, be that positive or negative, and I can say whatever I want, and I already got my bag, so I don't care about burning this bridge or whatever. Sure, suspicion will always exist. How truthful the person is something we can only measure throughout time, as they continuously prove themselves capable of being unbiased, or being authentic is the better word here, despite money changing hands, even if the ideal would be that nothing changed anything. But the fact that this sort of stuff happens, and we hear about it from time to time with different games, and it is everywhere. It's not just Star Wars Outlaws. It's not just Ubisoft. This is just a particularly bad case because it's combining people who are just in entertainment with people who are in journalism, with people who are more on the side of reviewers, and everything is getting tangled up and leading to, well, some people had some conditions, some had others, and how are we ever supposed to know which was under which conditions So what am I even getting here? This is a particular mess for Ubisoft because of the situation they're already in with Star Wars Outlaws, but this has happened forever, and they would like it to continue forever, and it has always been a problem and will continue to be unless we do something about it, or at the very least, we become informed and very careful of what we consume. But there is an even more insidious side to all of this. I want to talk about the problem that G-Man Lives went through.
I'm one of the good guys, Penguin.
G-Man Lives is another YouTuber for which I know of his stuff. I like some of his content. I don't like some of his other stuff, but you know, like anybody. He also got access to Star Wars Outlaws and published his preview, and he was very positive on the game. The video was disliked to hell and back as people continuously bullied him on every social media platform, asking him how much he got paid to give a positive review, that he was Mr. Moneybags, and that if it was an advertisement, he had to disclose it. Basically putting into question his authenticity. This led him to take down the video to stop the harassment and then double take on it and leave it back up, which is a decision that I respect. I know a lot of people will say that it is part of your job as a content creator, and that includes me, to take that harassment. You're putting yourself out there, you're creating something for the world to see, and if people don't like it, it just comes with the territory that they're going to try and tear you down, including, very often, losing their humanity and calling you horrible things or threatening you, your family, doxing, all sorts of things. And I do agree with that. I know what comes with the territory, and I'm very much prepared for it, but the adaptation process is not easy. As a very new content creator that I am, I still have trouble adjusting to it, and sometimes when it comes in big waves, it can be overwhelming. For him in this case it was, but then he doubled down on being authentic. But that's not where the problem itself comes from. It's not just that you're going to get bullied online or something like that. It's not even that this whole thing gets even messier with who to trust as people ask questions as they should, but that people liking your video, people choosing to watch it, people aligning with your personality has a very real economic incentive today. Even if somebody sits down and digs deep and puts out what they truly believe on something, whether or not people will agree with it, they just want to be honest with themselves, that is very often the wrong economic decision to take because of how society works today. Let me place it in a different but still the same example. If I know that absolutely everybody hates Star Wars Outlaws and has a vendetta against Ubisoft and wants to see the game fail, why would I make a video arguing that we should give the game a fair chance, we should see how it is when it releases, because while it might not set the world on fire from what we know, it might be perfectly fine, and that we should separate their horrible business practices and the way that they try to push those business practices on people from the actual game that you get to play. And we can say that the game is good, the business practices are bad, and if we put those two things together, no, we don't recommend it. But if at some point in the future those business practices were to change, or you could get this game at a discounted price, which very probably, it will probably be worth your time if you are a Star Wars fan and don't mind Ubisoft's very tired and repetitive open world formula. Why would I say that? Why would I risk myself saying something that probably in the context of this video, if you're watching up to this point, will make a ton of sense? But if the raging fire, if the majority of the consensus online, if the Twitter vibe check is game bad, complain about game, say it's terrible, if I do that, I guarantee that the majority of people are going to like it. They're going to want to share it, to retweet it, to quote it. They're going to want to champion me as a person with a platform because I'm just saying what everybody thinks on a stage. And therefore, we should make this person's stage bigger, and with that comes more money. Sure, you might put at risk some of your relationships with Ubisoft, for example, but we live in the cloud economy as well. Why not trade some of that trust for some of that clout? I've seen many accusations of many creators, for example, Moist Critical, or Penguin Zero, or Charlie, which is a creator that I do tend to enjoy. I think he's entertaining. As somebody who just publishes videos that get multiple millions of views on reviews and opinions on things, but before he ever reaches those opinions, he always seems to more or less align with the general consensus that people have on the internet. The same thoughts that the general consensus has, but through his own way of speaking, his own communication skills, which are entertaining and funny. And there's two ways of looking at that. Either the general consensus is right, and he's just falling in line with it very naturally, or a much more insidious thought could occur, which is to maintain their position as a thought leader, as a general influencer that people trust. The safest bet is to always vibe check something and more or less skew it in that direction so that the most amount of people agree with you. And you might be thinking that there are plenty of channels that pride themselves on being contrarian to call attention to themselves, but that's the problem. They'll be called out as contrarians, not as people who are expressing opinions that maybe not everybody shares or that can defend their arguments with actual fundamentals to back them up. You could also argue that there are plenty of channels and journalists that you heavily trust because they have consistently gone against certain opinions. But even when a mission statement by a journalist today is to really not let those opinions sway them, to try and be unbiased and just tell people what they think about something, you also have to wonder, as humans, are they really never influenced, even in their subconscious, by what the culture is talking about, by the general opinion that people have, by if people are rooting for something to win or lose? And the more that you look at it, the more it makes sense. And ever since I've started to turn YouTube into the thing I do full time, I see more and more signs of it. Reviewers across every single type of medium, be that music or movies or books or games, tend to be more contrarian with the smaller stuff that people don't care about as much. The big super release of the year that everybody is talking about, they tend to fall in line. And we come to the same question again. Are they doing this because everybody reached the same consensus organically, or because that's what the vibe was and you better follow it? Whether creators know it or not, they are following the trends, not just in formats or in styles of video, but in opinions as well. And it's getting very, very difficult to trust that anybody out there is actually trying to do you a favor, keep you informed, and be authentic. Reviewers and experts used to be tastemakers, and people could agree or disagree with them, and there used to be equally large tastemakers on different sides of the same argument, and that seems to be disappearing incredibly quickly. Now, they are there to validate the opinions of the masses because everybody has an opinion, whether they know about it, whether they've played it, watched the movie, heard the album, or not. That system had a ton of flaws in itself, but it did present the idea that there were people who dedicated themselves exclusively to doing this, and therefore they should at least know a little bit better, or have a better context of things with which to inform you, and that their intentions, the underlying intentions behind what they were telling you, were for your benefit. And today, all of that has changed. I don't think we realize just how true the expression is, but everyone's a critic. So I guess that the best critic is just the one that retweets what everybody else says, but the loudest and the funniest. I was talking about this with friend of the channel, Islar, that somehow we've reached the point where the people I trust the most in giving their honest opinions on things are Jerma. Honestly, it's like Jerma and Nakey Jakey and maybe Asmongold if it's a topic that he knows of. And that's strange and problematic. When I trust people who just are authentic because of their personality, because that is what they want to put forth, more than the people whose entire identity is focused around being authentic in their opinions to you as a consumer. So where do we go from here? We look at the problems, they're all changing now. Things being time sensitive will still matter because people like the day one hype, but it is starting to matter less as reviews start to trend more towards the entertainment and critique side of things. The time issue isn't as important. But if you really want to make money, if you want to build a sustainable business around giving your opinions to people, being there at day one still matters a lot, and I don't think that's ever going to change. Access journalism is still a problem. There are no intermediary governing bodies to ensure that an Associated Press collective gets access to something without having the pressure of the relationship hanging above them. The potential corruption and bribery as new people enter the scene and are desperate for money and clout will still exist, combined with the need to get that access to things. A pressure under which they can succumb and their integrity can disappear, and then they can sweep those issues under the rug and say that they don't need integrity or accountability because what they do is entertainment and not journalism, at least when it's most convenient for them to claim that. That honesty being eroded is a problem of not just the creators being afraid to be themselves and following those trends, but also of audiences being unwilling to take differing opinions, being unwilling to appreciate that somebody might have something to say that doesn't align with what you do. This isn't helped by some creators taking advantage of that and trying to push for it as aggressively as possible to kind of kneel into that more divisive extremist culture that we live in. But it's also fair to say that generally audiences want to have their thoughts validated and spoken back at them. And that's something that needs to change either in education or the landscape or algorithmically to make sure that those different opinions that are presented in respectful and thoughtful ways still have a place. The idea that something is economically sustainable still has to do a lot with that access journalism, but I think a lot of people are finding ways around that and have been for a while. Just make sure that your sponsors have absolutely no conflicts of interest, right? And so I believe that the ever-changing landscape of journalism, if it needs one thing moving towards the future, is transparency and accountability. Every single creator that is even journalism adjacent needs to be telling us if they had to have their video approved. Honesty and authenticity really do have a pretty good parallel in viewers and growth and retention and everything. So I don't understand why it's so scary for people to tell others, hey, this is how it works. I did have to submit myself to a pre-approval process, but I can tell you that I made a video, I submitted it, and they did not come back with any notes. So this is my raw, unfiltered opinion. To tell us that there was no pre-approval process, or to tell us that there was, and this is what they changed. Heck, they could even tell us that they didn't make a video because of a pre-approval process so that we're more aware of these things that are happening behind the scenes and how we should take them and who we should trust. The whole point of changing into the personality-driven world of journalism was to understand that people have biases and faults and flaws and that we take their opinion with those into account. So why are we not putting those things up front and center anymore? I also think that the general rules for disclosure need to change. Many content creators will tell you up front that they were flown out for this event and that they did receive this, this, and this, which did amount to X amount of money, and then you can come to your own conclusion on if you trust them or not. But the fact that they're being upfront about it definitely helps their case, where others will not say anything at all, or they will try to camouflage it, again, under that veil of, I don't need to be accountable, I'm just an entertainer type of stuff. If we have such clear rules from the FTC on disclosing advertisements and making sure that sponsored products or anything related to money changing hands or contracts has to exist, why don't we have these same standards for anything that could be related to access and journalism? I should be obligated to tell you that I had communications with this developer, that they told me about their game, that they gave me access to it, and that they had these sorts of conversations, and that after all of that, you can take my opinion how you want, but I am obligated to tell you, and after that, I can personally promise you that it did not impact my final opinion or my recommendation on it. And you can build your legacy and become trustworthy through years and years of doing things within the frameworks that are fair in transparency and disclosure to people. I think that we need some of our standards to change in order to benefit the audience. You. This has all made me think very carefully about the reviews I watch and how I trust them, and even if I'm letting the opinions and the vibe checks of people affect me when I do my things. And it's made me very conscious that I want to be as authentic as possible to you. And that does mean that I promise going forward that every single thing I do is going to be absolutely transparent. Every single thing that I can disclose to you, I will. Even if it's boring, even if it reduces my watch time or my viewer retention because people start hearing me talk for 40 seconds about the disclosure period of the video and they click off of it, I don't care. There's ethics and standards that we need to try and preserve unless we want the world to devolve into absolute chaos where nothing matters anymore. I hope this video has made you think. I hope it's at least brought up a lot of interesting questions to you, even if it hasn't given you answers. I appreciate the fact that you're still watching, and if you think that what I say in this video is valuable, please leave a like, leave a comment of any sort, share this video, engage with it, because the algorithm, as we all know, is a fickle beast. So anything that you can do to help the video out matters a lot. On my channel, I do news, reviews, retrospectives, including big 2-hour projects and things like that, and essays like this one. If that sounds interesting to you, hit the subscribe button. And if you're not sure, check out the channel. YouTube will probably just recommend you things from me that they think you'll like. And hey, that subscriber number does help in access journalism. A very special thanks to my patrons who go one step above in supporting me and get me one step closer to turning what is my passion into a career. I've been Mugthief. Stay hopeful and distinguish between entertainment and journalism where you can and where to place your trust. I'll do my best to earn yours. I'll see you again very soon.